Welcome back, everyone. This is Chronicles of the Grand Librarian, Chapter 3. And I apologize for the delay. There's a bit of effort that goes into writing, and sometimes it takes longer than I would like. Anyway, let's settle in, shall we? Chapter 3. Explanations. After instructing Lynx, Topaz, Blue Jay, and Owlet to bring the refugees captured by Crimson Mask to his library, Terius arrived with Gold Blur and Black Owl at Heroes United HQ. Terius's eyes tiredly watched the three masks as Black Owl dragged them to holding cells, wondering how far his rage would have gone if Gold Blur hadn't stopped him. Shaking it off for now, he follows Gold Blur to the meeting room of the Heroes United Council. The council was a group of some of the strongest, smartest, and well-connected heroes in Heroes United. Of course, by now Heroes United was nearly as old as the United States was, so the members of the council were not stagnant. When a member of the council leaves, the existing members vote on who to replace them based on what the hero can bring to the table. As it currently stood, Terius was the only former council member to have retired from the position willingly, stepping down to let others take the reins. Though as a former council member, he was still allowed to sit in on meetings and hear what they were discussing. Last Sun smiled at the three of them as they walked into the meeting room. Like King Arthur's Round Table, there was no head, but also like the ancient king, people naturally sat facing the alien man. Despite being from a different planet, he looked human. Short, dirty blonde hair framing a somewhat rounded face. The most alien thing being his deep silver eyes. His skin was a dark tan from being in the sun almost all the time. While he was bulletproof, Last Sun wore standard issue Heroes United tactical gear, though colored a dark green and purple like the escape pod that got him to Earth. Attached to either shoulder via tactical belts were two stun pistols that could take power from Last Sun, designed for him by Silver Sentry, Black Owl, and Terius. When he first became a hero, he used to always have a cape, but as a middle-aged man, he became annoyed at how often it would snag on basically everything. So now, only dons it when going out for ceremonial purposes. Golden Blur took her spot next to Last Sun, the Canadian representative for Heroes United. People often get her position wrong given her Latina heritage. She wore a full body suit despite her powers preventing any sort of friction. The suit was gold with dark purple waves going down the legs and upper sides, the waves wrapping around her arms. It produced a somewhat calming pattern when she was at super speed. She had no doubt been up for hours, but her chipper attitude and joyful smiles made it seem like she just got up. Lion Guard sat next to Gold Blur, his mechanical right arm setting his spear down in a slot intended for it. The spear could expand and contract into several different weapons, Lion Guard's standard favorite being the shield, which had a white lion's face on it. His mechanical arm had white marks where once were tattoos on a human arm. Other than some tattoos that seemingly connected his arm to his heart, his chest was bare. His other arm adorned in a gauntlet that was made of the same tech as his spear, but also a lion's claws. His dark eyes sadly lingered on the empty chair next to him, where Northern Africa's representative once sat. Next to the empty chair was the only other member of the council that was there at its founding. Origin Sorceress looked like a Hindu woman in her 40s, a golden veil atop her head accenting her emerald eyes, and the robes wrapped around her body were lavender with accents of silver. She carried no weapon and never needed it, preferring non-violent solutions when it comes to combat, Despite their respect for one another, Terius and her often butted heads, trying to convince her friend that his temporal abilities and the future sight they grant were not a curse upon him, proved to be difficult for her. Sitting next to Origin Sorceress was a man who was not as old as her or the librarian, but still older than most of the council members. Silver's Sentry, a German billionaire with a selfless attitude. In World War I, he defected to Europe, and when Hitler rose to power, he was forced to leave. But now he stands proudly in his silver armor, based on Germany's Teutonic Knights, the chest adorned in a bright blue version of their black cross, the most beloved protector of his home country. His short white hair was the only sign of age on the 100-year-old man, who had the face of a 20-year-old. He often found himself frustrated when trying to reverse engineer Terius' magic tech, lamenting his lack of talent in magic. He and Black Owl helped to keep the world-spanning Heroes United funded. Next to Silver Sentry was a woman dressed in what looked like a blue, red, and white World War I British infantry uniform, which struck anyone who looked at her as odd, given they would see her as whatever their own race or ethnicity is. Spirit of Freedom was an enigma in many ways. Everyone can agree she's red-haired and roughly 6 feet tall, and what she's wearing, and that was it. A World War I genetic experiment, whatever experiment did this to her, had been lost in the war. Officially a Navy sergeant, she preferred to work alone during both wars. When she met the Heroes United back then, she was hesitant to trust a group with so much power, but has grown to see those here as a family. Next to Spirit of Freedom sat another woman, this one Latina, with her bright green hair complementing her deep brown skin tone. Both eyes a bright mix of orange and red, and her lips a deep ocean blue. Her outfit was an older school hero outfit, a skin-tight suit with depictions of floating pieces of land or rushing winds, crashing waves moving down her legs till it met solid black stone, then magma, then her boots depicted as white hot and metallic. The newest member of the council was named Gaia. While not the primordial entity, she was granted power by the embodiment of the planet and given the authority to speak for her. Since she's the youngest, she often feels like she's not taken seriously, but truthfully the council is glad to have her new ideas. Next to Gaia was another older member. Tsukuyomi was dressed in a somewhat spandex-like white under a kimono of silver and white, shortened for ease of movement in combat. Her long silver hair was done up in 2 long loops, and even after the loops her hair went down to her waist. The moon goddess of Japan hadn't always seen eye to eye with Heroes United, but when Terius, Silver Sentry, and Spirit saved her country and people from the bombs, she helped them convince the Japanese government to change sides, and has ever since represented her country as a council member. Next to Tsukuyomi was another empty chair, though it seemed the council members were wrestling with themselves to not be upset over losing this one. Next to the empty chair was another of the newer faces, Atlantic. As an Atlantean, he has bluish green-scaled armor. He looked mostly human, even if paler than normal given how deep Atlantis had sunk, his retractable helmet forming a collar on land. An obsidian and gold trident locked into place next to him like Liongard's spear, ancient runic writing inscribed onto it and his armor. Atlantic reigned as king in Atlantis, making him the most suitable to represent it in Heroes United. Finally, between Last Sun and Atlantic was Black Owl, sitting calmly as always, his mask retreated into his suit, revealing dirty blonde hair and 2 silver eyes. While technically another of the younger members, Black Owl had earned respect with his many gadgets and many plans. Of course, those same plans had been hidden when he first joined, leading to arguments. But cooler heads prevailed, and while the council doesn't agree with him hiding these plans from them, the fact they existed provided some comfort when going into battle against mind-controlling villains. As everyone settled into their seats, Tsukuyomi looked at Terius off to the side and cleared her throat. I assume today's meeting has more on the table than originally planned? She asked, raising a brow to Black Owl and Goldblur, both of them nodding and giving her a grimace that made the stoic goddess uneasy. Last Sun stood and turned to Terius before he cleared his throat and the hologram projector inside the table turned on. As Tsukuyomi stated in her email yesterday, several strange energy signatures, which Lion Guard and Atlantic have verified to be a mix of magic and technology, landed all over the planet a few weeks ago. Then just yesterday, more energy signatures, similar to the first wave, but this time distinctly tech or magic, landed in the same areas. Black Owl messaged just half an hour ago that a group he believes to be from the first wave was found in Topaz City. The hologram of the globe lit up with dots, purple indicating the first wave, red and blue used in the second. The globe spinning till everyone could see Topaz City, and the purple dot turning green there. Last Sun motioned for Terius, who stood up and stepped towards the table, the hologram taking on the appearance of the twins when he waved his hand. The first wave of energy signatures were likely escape pods, refugees from an intergalactic war that's been going on for eons, only just now hitting the Milky Way. Terius began explaining, another series of hand gestures turning the hologram into a view of multiple galaxies. Waves of red and blue spreading out, wiping each other out, and anything in between them, slowly encroaching on the Milky Way galaxy. Then as they touch the Milky Way, purple dots fly from the red and blue dots, all headed for Earth. Wait, if it's just now hitting the Milky Way, how do you know so much about it? Sir, Gaia blurted out, suddenly reeling herself in as if afraid she had interrupted. Terius smiled soothingly at her, reminded of the last Gaia to sit in her seat. Shaking his head of the memories, he motioned at the hologram, zooming in towards the beginning area of the red and blue dots. Zooming further to a field of debris, Terius motioned for the hologram to rewind, and the debris field got closer and closer together, till it formed an Earth-like supermassive planet. Wait, I've seen this planet before, Last Sun said as he leaned in to look at the hologram. Terius nodded solemnly, eyes once more roaming to the others at the table. For once, the old man felt like a much younger man being asked to tell the class about his project, his hands shaking as some of them looked confused, as if not knowing what Last Sun was talking about, and others gained a look of recognition. Origin Sorceress gave a sad frown before meeting Terius' gaze. She gave him a reassuring smile, and he shook himself again, collecting himself as he turned to Last Sun. Yes, some of you have likely seen it in my file. This war and I share an origin, Authoria, the planet of librarians, or it was. As I just showed you, admittedly in reverse, the planet is gone now, torn apart by an explosion originating from the planet's core itself. We can get into the whys and hows of my people's civil war and their survival of a planetary explosion later. Tsukuyomi called this meeting with a more pressing issue. Kusanagi, Yata no Kagami, and Yasakani no Megatama were all stolen 3 days ago at 7 a.m. A mere hour ago, North Korea informed the world of its theft of the imperial regalia and showed more Arthurian refugees, though claiming them as a new generation of North Korean geniuses. Before they could list demands for the return of the regalia, well, see for yourselves. Terius moved back as he wondered if he had taken over too much there. Tsukuyomi pressed a button on the table and it switched to a video feed showing North Korean military leaders standing in front of metallic-skinned Arthurians. As they were bragging about their accomplishments, 2 large shadows overtook the screen. A large boom sounded off, shaking the camera and making it fall over. The camera showing a large blue and silver whale-shaped beast fighting a blocky red and gold spaceship, the two firing on each other as beams of light and streaks of metal fell to the land below. The last thing the camera saw was a large red metal boot as one of the streaks of metal that fell from the spaceship crushed it. The faces at the table looked grim. North Korea won't accept our help. Last Son's voice broke the silence first. Saying aloud what the majority were thinking, Tsukuyomi looked at him from her seat. She grit her teeth like she wanted to protest, but she knew he was right. She stood up, grabbing her sword as the others knew she planned to go in alone. A mixture of surprise and satisfaction crossing their faces when Terius met her at the door. No one said this mission had to be official. If we wait for everyone to give us permission to help them, this world would have died a long time ago, he said simply, his face deliberately stoic as with a snap his dragon-headed cane appeared in his hand. Spirit of Freedom and Silver Sentry shared a look before standing up, Terius smiling softly when they walked up to join the two of them. Don't log the jet on your way out. Villain groups always steal them, they're insured, but your DNA will be logged automatically on the teleporter, Last Son said. Turning to the rest of the heroes, he smirked as he pressed a button and returned the table to the world map view. The younger heroes grinned and sat up more, realizing there was still work to be done outside of North Korea. The rest of us are going to have to split up. If the Crimson Masks and North Korea's military is any example, people are going to try and take advantage of these refugees, and those larger ships seem to have some way of tracking them. Gaia, we need you leading teams to find and, if need be, extract the refugees to the Grand Library. Last Son and Black Owl immediately started working on a plan with the remaining council members. Terius smiled, knowing his people were in good hands as he walked to the hangar bay with Tsukuyomi, Silver Sentry, and the Spirit of Freedom. This reminds me of when Tsukuyomi joined, hunting down Nazi loyalists that refused to believe their war was over or that Hitler was dead, Silver Sentry mused. His voice betrayed the neutral helmet as he joyfully recalled the days when the four of them worked together. While they headed for the jets, Terius' mind went back, not to their first fight as a team, but their first confrontation with Tsukuyomi. 1941. Terius looked a bit different back then, clinging to the beliefs and honor of King Arthur and his court. His high-tech armor was more hidden as he wore a cloak over attire far more suited from a ball or some other formal ceremony. His metallic skin shape-shifted to be more human in color. He stood next to Spirit of Freedom, who comparatively didn't look any different compared to her modern form, still wearing a World War I uniform in red, white, and blue colors. Those said colors were more muted. Just because you're bulletproof doesn't mean you want to be shot at. Silver Sentry was in his stealth suit. Still mostly silver in color, it had a webbing pattern of black lines, a series of cameras and projectors that would allow it to camouflage. You sure you can handle yourself out there, old fart? That robe and tailored outfit isn't exactly combat ready, Silver Sentry commented as he did final checks on his suit. Spirit rolled her eyes at the combative genius. Terius simply put on a small smile as he looked down at the Japanese military field. I am combat ready no matter what clothes I wear. Besides, our objective is to destroy the planes so there are no more kamikaze into our own vessels. While the reasons the higher-ups want us to do it may be selfish, the act of preventing a suicide strike is the noblest mission I've been asked to do all war, Terius said, the words making Silver Sentry and Spirit look sad. They knew the saying was true for them, but that was war. Most battles and missions had no nobility in them. Yeah, well, don't get used to it, is all Silver managed to say, refocusing on his armor's final checks. Spirit placed a hand on Terius' shoulder, and he gave her a small smile as he took a deep breath. Noticing something streaking up from the ground at their dropship, Terius narrowed his eyes and made a throwing motion. Whatever he did bisected the ground-to-air missile and caused it to explode before it got close enough to the dropship. Shit, we've been made. We gotta jump now, boys, Spirit says, grabbing a rifle from next to her and a bag of explosive. Silver cursed under his breath as he quickly got his helmet on. Terius didn't wait for them, stopping off the edge and falling straight down towards whatever shot at them. The crew of the weapon screaming as they ran away from the thing falling straight for them. Terius spoke calm and clear, his voice piercing the wind rushing past him. A knight's armor is his pride. Rent me steel of dragon's hide. His clothes glowed, and the glow soon enveloped his body. While still glowing, Terius crashed into the weapon, kicking up a cloud of dust as he hit with much more force than he should have from the drop. The soldiers picked up their rifles and fired into the dust, assuming they had hit parts of their destroyed weapon when they heard metallic pings. Spirit landed in similar fashion onto one of the planes they were sent to destroy. This achieved a large boom and a plume of fire. The concussive wave from said plane exploding cleared the dust, and the soldiers that shot at Terius realized that the pings were coming off him when they saw him. Terius Chant had summoned a suit of medieval-looking armor, painted electrum and purple. It was detailed to look like a dragon, the gauntlets ending in claws, the helm shaped like a dragon's maw clamped shut. Metallic wings and tail flexed like the real thing off his back. The eyes flashed as Terius raised his head, and with a whoosh he was behind the soldiers, their weaponry shredded. Monster! They shouted out, running away from the suddenly armored being that moved faster than their eyes. As Terius turned his head, he saw Silver using electric-based attacks to knock out more soldiers non-lethally, turning his plasma-based weaponry on the planes, melting their engines. Silver grew big enough to grab one of the planes and slammed it into another. With a flap of the metallic wings, Terius flew through another plane, the Japanese plane blowing up behind him. Tsukuyomi! Tsukuyomi! The soldiers shouted, still firing on the three beings as their planes were torn apart. Silver Sentry flew next to Terius as the last of the planes was destroyed, turning his helmeted head so the faceplate faced Terius. Nice armor! Mine's telling me these guys are calling for Tsukuyomi. Last time I checked, she wasn't a war goddess, was she? He shouted over the flames and explosions. Terius narrowed his eyes and saw something approaching them. Something fast. Before Silver could ask if Terius could hear him, Terius moved in front of him, his clawed hands now each holding a katana at bay, as he stared down a woman with moonlight for hair, dressed in samurai armor, a demonic mask covering her face. They were literally calling their backup, Silver mused, focusing his weaponry at the new combatant. Spirit grinned, ran up, and swatted Tsukuyomi out of the sky, the Japanese goddess making a crater in the concrete as she landed with a groan. She quickly got back up, sword still in either hand, as if they refused to leave her. Terius floated down to the lip of the new crater. A knight's sword is his soul. Now the dragon once more is whole. Purple fire extends from both of Terius's hands, forming a long sword that had curled tips coming off. The design on the flat of the blade made it look as if the sword was made of the same fire. The handguard, the open maw of a dragon, its horns curled into each other and formed the handle. Terius pointed the tip of the blade down at Tsukuyomi. You get one chance, goddess. Yield, Terius said calmly, his voice more gravelly, as if he spoke through a growl. Tsukuyomi stood in the center of the crater and shifted her feet, swords moving into a slashing motion at speeds neither Spirit nor Silver could even see. As to the rest of the world, it looked like she turned into a moonbeam. To Terius, however, she might as well have stood still as he called out one last time. Pause for effect! Modern day. Terius' reminiscing comes to an end as the four of them step into the jet they were borrowing for the mission. If the fighting has ended by the time we get there, we should focus on getting the refugees and the regalia and getting out. I don't want to risk a fight when we don't know how the war has affected their weapons and defenses, Carius says, letting Spirit and Silver ahead of him to go into the pilot and co-pilot seats. Come on, Dragon Knight. You talk like this is our first covert mission together, Silver says, confidently as his armor synced up with the jet and it started to raise up into the air. Tsukuyomi chuckles at Silver's confidence as she took her own seat, buckling in and making sure Silver heard the click. Perhaps because our every covert mission ended in far too many explosions? Spirit said with a smirk. Silver waves his hand at her as they flew gently out of the hangar bay, not wanting too much noise in case someone noticed their departure. Carius remained standing as the plane took off towards their destination. His eyes linger on three of the oldest friends he had in this world. I know I retired and have no authority to order you, but if I ask you to run, I'd appreciate it if you did so, Carius said. The three turned their heads to him, complicated mixes of emotion clear on their faces. The silence hung in the jet for a bit, which made even Carius nervous. He kept his face schooled to hide his nerves and fear, but they had known him the longest of anyone, they could tell. You're right, you don't have any authority to give us orders anymore, which is good, because that one's stupid. The silence was finally broken by Spirit. The other two nodded their agreement and looked Carius straight in the eye, Silver's mask coming up as they did so. Carius lets the mask of emotions fall a bit as he sighs. It was worth asking, he smiles softly. He sat down in his seat as they got far enough away to speed up. The jet Silver designed with black owls zoomed through the sound barrier like it was wet tissue paper. The other three grin at Carius as they turned back to the cockpit screen. Sure it was, old man, Silver remarks as they head for North Korea. Alright, well, it's a little bit of a shorter one this time, but I said everything that I wanted to say, and I hope you all look forward to the next chapter. This has been Carius Feldum, and I will see you in a week.